Good deal. So, how is everybody doing? How are y'all doing today? Hope you are doing well. As Terry said, I am Amy Rodquist-Kodet. I'm a health coach with UK Health and Wellness. I am a mom to a teenager and to 4-year-old twin toddlers. And I also have a very special spot in my heart for caregivers who are supporting those elders. My mother-in-law has Alzheimer's. And I was just telling Terry, we recently moved her about a year ago to an assisted care facility, a memory care facility. And as many of you know, that is just a tricky place to be, especially when navigating care and boundaries with siblings and all of that. So, for those of you who are maybe in a similar situation, I'm with you. I got a lot of empathy, a lot of energy kind of going in those care decision areas. And also really wanting to honor our elders, kind of wanting to honor our values as well as our own energy resources and the very, very busy lives of working and caring for families, kind of feeling like being in the sandwich generation. So, I would love to hear how y'all are doing. Any of you seen this before? This is what they call a stress continuum model. This actually came out of the special forces of the US Marine Corps. And I would just love to hear from you today. How are you doing? There are four options here. Red is where you are kind of just feeling at your max, right? This might be where you are just feeling an exorbitant amount of stress. You're actually maybe feeling ill about it, maybe experiencing a lot of depression, anxiety, overwhelm, just persistent disabling stress and kind of loss of overall function. That's the red zone. The orange is just more of kind of feeling just like kind of in that injured place. Maybe you're feeling a loss of control, maybe feeling a bit of anxiousness, maybe panic, depression. Kind of that inner conflict might be coming out for you because of all sorts of experiences, personally and professionally. To our left, then we have yellow, and that's really that reaction stage, right? You might be feeling more mild distress. This usually feels like it's going to go away. It feels pretty low risk. Maybe you're just feeling irritable, just kind of like down, maybe a loss of motivation, just maybe haven't been sleeping well, just in that kind of place of disconnection. That's the yellow zone. And green is, hey, you're ready to rumble. You're ready to engage. You're feeling kind of at your optimal level. Um, you're at your best. Maybe you're feeling motivated, just in line with your values of who you are and who you want to be. So I would love to hear from the group today. Maybe in the chat, you do not need to place any definition around why you might be feeling green, yellow, orange, or red. There is no judgment. You are just as welcome to be here as in a green zone as you are a red zone. I would say for me personally, I'm probably in the middle of green and yellow. What would that be? Like a chartreuse, perhaps? I'm not sure. We've had some stomach flu at our house over the last 5 or 6 days. I'm going to spare you all the details on that. But yeah, people have not been sleeping well and it has been something. So I'm kind of like maybe tipping a little bit more towards yellow, but I'm really, really glad that you're here. So if you want to tell me where are you, kind of give me the color that you're feeling today on that continuum. And also tell me, give me a sense of what you're hoping to walk away with at the end of our session. What what are you wanting today? I'm seeing some yellow, yellow. Yeah, okay. Hi, we could all be the yellow zone. All right. Yep. Feeling some orange, bottom of yellow, orange, yellow, yellow. Okay. So, friends, We're all here together in this. Yeah. What are some folks really wanting to walk away with? Are you hoping to feel or kind of get something from thinking about boundaries as a caregiver or in any other areas of your life? Anybody want to chat, pop in there? What are you hoping to walk away with from today? Would love to hear. Okay. Yep. Some new skills for some family relationships. Absolutely. We're going to be talking about that. Great. Anybody else have anything specific they want to walk away with? As Terry mentioned, we're going to definitely have some time for questions as well. So at the end, we'll dive into that. Yeah, confidence to set some much needed boundaries. Absolutely. This is a skill, everybody, right? This is like riding a bike or learning how to tie your shoes or learning a new language. The more we practice, the better we get at it, the more skillful, the more our muscles are developed and we get stronger in building these skills. What else we have here? A better understanding of what is or is not in my control. We're going to be talking about that a lot. Great point, Gail. Thank you. Yeah, learn how to handle conflict with family. Absolutely. These are pressure cooker situations, everybody, right? This isn't just like people disagreeing on where they want to go for dinner. These are about responsibility, who's taken on what, maybe making decisions about a loved one. Not everybody is on the same page. Different people have different needs and different values. This is about as tricky as it gets. So I'm not promising any easy answers today, but we can be here together because as I know, there's a lot of wisdom in this room and would love to just really honor what you all bring to this space as well. Yeah, learning where to set boundaries, what's appropriate, how to share caregiving. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. So let's get in here, shall we? So this is just like real general slide. What in the world is a boundary? Y'all probably have a pretty clear sense of maybe what a boundary is or isn't. Boundaries a clear line can tell you where you begin, where the other person begins, where you stop. It's really about a definition of clarity of what's yours to take on and what is not. I always like to say that when you start to feel resentment for me at least, is kind of the guidepost that I need to examine a boundary, right? So if you start to feel that like resentment feeling, you know what I'm talking about, right? That part of you that when you say yes, you really wished you had said no, but for a whole host of reasons, in order to like diffuse conflict in the moment, it's going to be a struggle, other people are going to be mad, right? But when you start to feel those resentment feelings, that is something to pay attention to of like, okay, let's look at the boundaries. Let's reassess where we're going here. And in any relationship, boundaries define where things are. Like, where is our personhood? Where does it start and stop? Where's our identity? Where's our responsibility? As some of y'all have already mentioned, what is in my control and what is not? And that is the key to boundaries. So let me say this is not hyperbole. I would say when I understood the difference between a request and a boundary, it blew my mind. Because what I found is that for a lot of years, I was just trying to make the best requests I knew how. And so we're going to spend a little time here because I think this often isn't clearly defined. And my guess is maybe this will be helpful for you like it was for me. So if your boundaries aren't working, maybe you've been trying to set some boundaries. My guess is you're probably making requests instead of setting boundaries. And over the next probably 3 or 4 slides, a lot of this work comes from therapist Haley McGee. Funny story. Saw Haley on Instagram, right? It was kind of our algorithms got locked in, and I saw her do a video, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And so a lot of this work comes from some of her research around boundaries. And so this is what she suggests. So requests. Request is when we ask someone else to change their behavior, and they may or may not do so, right? So for this reason, requests are fundamentally unenforceable. The outcome is completely out of our control. Versus a boundary. A boundary is when we are making clear what our actions will be. And so for this reason, boundaries are fundamentally enforceable because boundaries aren't about what other people are going to do, what they're going to say, what they're going to think, how they're going to feel. Boundaries are what we are going to do, how we are going to respond when X, Y, and Z happen. And so therefore, the outcome is completely within our control. And an ultimatum, we're just going to touch on because I think it's kind of interesting to kind of understand what ultimatums are about. Ultimatums focus on other people's behavior and really wanting to change other people's behavior, not our own. So when I was putting these slides together, I was like, oh boy, we have a brand new boundary that has been set at our house within the last couple weeks or so. So as I mentioned, I've got these 4-year-old preschooler twins, and we definitely are setting boundaries with them. But if you want like a world-class, I think like gold level, you know, experience on setting boundaries, play with some teenagers, right? So we've got an almost 17-year-old at our house. And we do a lot of contributions at our house. We kind of, in order to be a functional family with lots going on, we ask different people to contribute. The twins contribute, I contribute, my husband, our daughter. Daughter has got a variety of contributions, kind of chores that we ask her to do. She's a full extracurricular, sports, job, the whole deal, right? Great student, lots going on. But everybody, the two things that were making me mental is we ask her to bring out recycling and garbage every week. This is not a laborious task, probably from start to finish, takes 5 minutes, right? Asking her to do it twice a week, and then our house isn't like a pig pen. So, folks, years we have been like this, where I'm like, please take out the garbage. Please take out the garbage. Garbage needs to go out. Why are you not taking out the garbage? Anybody else have this experience? And I'm over it, right? Because then she gets frustrated, I get frustrated, and I realize I am making a ton of requests. And it hit me like, okay, what needs to shift here? So long story short, I said, pick 2 nights. Like what days? I'm pick two days throughout the week, one on the weekend, one a weekday that you were going to do your garbage and recycling. She picked Wednesday and Saturday or Sunday. Great. So I said, if the garbage and the recycling are not out in the recycling bins at the end of the road by 11:59 on a Wednesday night or a Sunday night, then the next morning I will take them out and I will deduct $5 from your checking account and go buy myself a nice coffee, right? And she's like, Mom, that's not fair, Mom. And I'm like, listen, girl, I am done with the major requesting, right? Let me tell you, folks, we've done this 2.5 weeks now. Do you think she has missed one recycling or one garbage? She has not. She has taken them out every single time. I have not had to make a peep about it. And so I think what this kind of illustrates, now granted, this is different with adults. There's a different power dynamic, right, with kids versus adults. But I think what finally shifted for me was like, I'm done making the requests and what is in my control without the fussing, without all of the reminders. And so that's an invitation to think about what can you do? What is in your control? But the first step really is a request, right? When we make a request, we are asking somebody else to do something or to not to do something in order to meet our needs, right? This is your first line of action. So an example might be, would you please speak more calmly? Right? Would you not yell when we are in the midst of a heated conversation? So requests ask someone to change their behavior. And as you know, they may or may not do so. So as we've talked about, requests are fundamentally unenforceable. They're out of our control, but it is the place to begin. Why? Because requests have an opportunity for you to say, hey, here's what my need is. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling burned out. I'm feeling like I don't have the capacity to do this, that, and the other, right? So it's important to offer a window of time as well to shift that behavior, especially if it's been going on for a long time, and not necessarily demand an immediate change. Sometimes a new skill needs to happen, but to really think about and see requests as an opportunity to build connection. It's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to make a request. It's vulnerable to say like, hey, I need help with that, but it is the first place to kind of begin to grow that partnership and that collaboration in order to move towards the same goal of whatever that might be. And then we move on to level 2, right? So a boundary is the second course of action. So after you've made the request and you've given it a little time, depending on what it is, and things are not changing, you kind of got to ask yourself, okay, what am I going to do here, right? So when we set a boundary, we're making clear what we will or will not tolerate, what we will or will not say yes to. So kind of following along with that example, I'm not going to continue this conversation when you're yelling at me. I'm going to go into the other room and we can talk about this tomorrow, right? This idea of what are we going to do? A boundary has to have something that's enforceable by you. So in this case, it's leaving the other room, right? When we set a boundary, we're making it clear what we are going to do. And so since this boundary is this second kind of step, when we make this request and the other person is unwilling or unable to meet it, it then is kind of on our terms of then how are we going to respond to this? We can either accept that this person is never going to change, that they're not able, they're not willing, whatever the case may be, they're not going to change their behavior. And sometimes we choose to live with that, right? We probably all have examples of people we love. They're maybe doing something we don't, it's not our favorite, it's not our preference, whatever, but we think like, okay, this is that person, that's not going to change. I can accept that. And then there are areas where that's not acceptable, right? That's when we need to choose to either stay in that situation as it is or set the boundary of what we can enforce. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The last piece is kind of differentiating between the boundary versus an ultimatum. And I will say this is a little bit grayer. The area between boundaries and ultimatums can be a little trickier to distinguish. But what I think and what some of the research and things that I've read is that this really lies in our tone, in our intention, in our mindset, right? So a boundary is within our limits, but an ultimatum is specifically designed to really control somebody else. And it's constantly focused on somebody else's behavior versus what is it that we can do to change. So I thought this was a pretty good one. This may or may not be an example from my own life where we're just kind of saying an ultimatum might be something we say at the end of a huge fight, like, if you don't start helping move around here and I'm showing some respect, I'm out of here, and you slam the door as you make your point, right? That might be an example of an ultimatum. And the thing with the ultimatums, when we kind of examine our own tone, is that usually we're in that place of anger, we're in a place of bewilderment, despair, and oftentimes people set ultimatums that they're not going to enforce and they're not going to change. And so we can find ourselves in this like really tricky pattern where we're having the same argument again and again and again and again. And so that may be something to kind of notice. Hey, are you willing to make a change around where you're responsible? Or is it this like really sticky dance that you and your partner, or you and a sibling, or you and another person might be in, and kind of noticing the differences, right? To to see where to move forward with that. So, why do we get stuck in making repeated requests? Because my guess is that probably feels a little familiar, right? Where we never cross that bridge from requests to boundaries. So I think for me, this has looked like we don't believe that our needs are valid or important enough to warrant setting hard boundaries. Chances are you've got a pretty good sense that, um, it's going to be a hard conversation. We always say, right, that the people who are most upset that you are setting a boundary are the people who are benefiting by not having the boundary in the first place. So there's going to be some kickback, there's going to be some resistance. And a lot of us are trained to make other people happy, right? To not rock the boat, to put everybody else's needs before our own. And so to give yourself some grace, some empathy, some self-compassion in that setting boundaries, especially in tough situations like caregiving and family dynamics, are hard, right? We've been told that our needs are unreasonable. So it seems that maybe our boundary is too demanding. And like we just said, you're going to get some kickback around it. But keep in mind that other people's opinions about your boundary, other people's reactions to your boundary, that is about their experience. They get to have them. Other people get to have their own reaction and response to your boundary. They may not like it. That doesn't mean that your boundary isn't valid and important for your own well-being, for your own capacity, for what needs to happen for you. And I think lastly, we're afraid that the grief that will arise when we accept that other people aren't changing or setting a boundary may mean stepping back from this relationship, right? So sometimes it can feel really high stakes. And I would really suggest, and we're going to talk about resources at the end too, but if this feels so overwhelming and daunting, I would really invite you to call for some reinforcements. Our therapists through Work Life are amazing at helping setting boundaries. My colleague Jackie Carroll and I work with a lot of clients to help them set boundaries as well. So working with your own therapist, doing couples therapy, family therapy, like really getting some support, especially if this is a new behavior, or if this is not a family norm. Maybe you don't have a lot of people in your life that are setting healthy boundaries. And so if this feels really, really overwhelming, just know you're not alone and that there is help available. Okay, so how to support ourselves with the grief and the guilt that inevitably are coming up. So this comes from the work of Dr. Becky Kennedy. She is a child and family psychologist. I also follow her on Instagram. She's got a really great researched book called Good Inside. There's stuff about boundaries in there as well. But I love what she talks about when setting and needing to when we're setting our boundaries and needing to deal with our own grief and guilt around them. How setting and enforcing our boundaries means accepting the limits of our control, right? When we're trying to constantly troubleshoot and make everybody okay with our boundaries, first of all, it's not possible, right? We can't change other people's behavior. We can't change their opinions. We can't change other people, right? It's like the be all end all quote that I need like tattooed on my eyelids. I can't change another person, even though I think I'm really good at trying. But I think it's really, really important, right, to know we're expending a lot of energy on a fool's mission. And so to keep it pointed at what we can control, knowing that other people may be upset, they may be disappointed, they may be angry, and they are allowed to have those experiences. So Dr. Kennedy suggests two things that can support us when we're kind of understanding guilt. Number one, there's guilt we feel for not acting in accordance with our values, right? So you know that feeling, right? Maybe we've done something that's really out of line with who we are and who we want to be. That's not, most likely, that's not the type of guilt you're going to experience when you are experiencing and setting boundaries. Chances are that's the guilt number two. So this is the guilt that we feel when we take on somebody else's discomfort or disappointment, right? And that is the type of guilt that we need to practice letting go of. That is sucking our energy dry. And chances are it's not enabling us to set some healthy boundaries that's going to help us be the caregiver we need to be, the worker we need to be, the parent we need to be, etc. So when that guilt comes up, see if you can stop for a moment and think, okay, what kind of guilt is this? Is this the guilt because I'm not in alignment with my values? Or is this the guilt because I'm taking on somebody else's discomfort or anger or disappointment? And so if you can get clear that, okay, yeah, it's fallen into guilt number two, that's going to be really, really helpful information to help you move through that discomfort, right? So when that surge of guilt comes up, it really is important to kind of prioritize our needs and set boundaries. Because many of us learned growing up that we needed to increase that part of us that grows connection and shut down the parts of us that don't. So these are old circuits in our brains, right, that are no longer serving us. We are having these alarms go off. We're feeling dysregulated, probably because of things that we've learned in childhood. So this is another thing that if you're really, really feeling the distress around setting boundaries, this is a great thing to talk to a therapist about around what can we do to help regulate our bodies and our brains when we need to have these difficult conversations. So part of this work is learning to tolerate that feeling of guilt and begin to create some new circuitry. So I'm a big fan of kind of using soothing words and soothing touch to support ourselves when we are in the midst of feeling some dysregulation. So this also comes from Dr. Kennedy's work. So the next time you're feeling that surge of number two guilt come on, I'd really invite you to go to a touchstone of some supportive words that could really be helpful for you. So these are just a few things that I find helpful. I'm really going to invite you to write down some words that you can kind of hold on to in the midst of it as well. So number one, my wants and my needs matter. Prioritizing my wants and needs isn't selfish. It's self-sustaining. I know you know this. I know we all know this, right? Put our mask on first before assisting other people that need support. We can't, give from an empty cup, right? We know this. And yet, this is where the rubber hits the road of where we can begin to fill that up empty cup is the use of boundaries, right? So prioritizing those wants and needs, that self-sustaining piece of the boundary setting is a really important part. When I prioritize things that nourish me, I'm better able to care for others without burning out because the world does not need more burnt out caregivers. We don't need more burnt out employees. We don't need more burnt out parents. And yet, the world is kind of set up against us, right? Caring for everybody else's needs, not really having learned behaviors on how to create these boundaries for ourselves. So keeping in mind, this is a skill. This is something we practice. This isn't something that most of us are automatically born with, right? This is one of my favorite mantras. I say to myself literally every day, probably more than once a day. This feels hard because it is hard. not because I'm doing anything wrong, right? These last two come from the work that I did before I worked at the University of Kentucky. I worked in hospice and end of life care with a wellness center in Minneapolis. So I worked with a lot of caregivers that were caring for loved ones that were actively dying. And these were two of a training that I went to that still continue to be like really supportive for me. May I offer love, knowing that I cannot control other people's response. May I remain in peace and let go of expectations. I think it's those expectations that continue to be a killer for a lot of things, right? When we want certain things to go a certain way, we think they're going to, and then life shows up. Life happens. A lot of this work is rooted in self-compassion and as a powerful tool for caregivers. I'll include some resources with Terry about self-compassion. We actually have a self-compassion group at UK for employees. So that may be something that you're interested in as well. But I'm going to invite you now just to take a few moments and write down, send a text to yourself. We're not going to share this. This is just for you. What phrase are you longing to hear from somebody else? What do you wish a loved one, your best friend would say to you? Maybe it's about your caregiving. Maybe it's about boundaries. Maybe it's about something really difficult in your life. But I'm just going to invite you to just take a few moments. What is the phrase you are really, really longing to hear? Maybe that you're doing a good job, that you are doing enough, right? So just go ahead, take a few moments. Maybe it's a phrase that I've already gotten here, but what would feel really, really nourishing to hear? So the reason I bring up this idea of like a mantra or a phrase, for some people it's sacred scripture, for other people it's just a singular word, right? It doesn't matter exactly what it is, but it's something you can return to, put your hands on your heart and say it to yourself during those really hard moments of struggle, when you feel so alone, when you feel like nobody else on the planet could understand what is your reality right now. Offering yourself some self-compassion in the midst of a really hard thing is a really powerful way to care for yourself. So definitely practice this during some of those really tough moments. And briefly, I'm just going to mention a few things here at the intersection of boundaries and self-care, right? Is that you deserve the care that you give. And so here are a couple or kind of 5 different things that I have found helpful. This comes from the work of Coach Mara Glatzel. She does a lot on needs, and we are humans that are needy, right? Oftentimes we're the last to the party when it comes to acknowledging our own needs. But kind of asking yourself, what's your capacity today? Just because you've always done it doesn't mean it's a good idea to keep doing it, right? Are you piling on things to your plate that no one has even asked you to take care of? Sometimes it's about learning how to say no to yourself. This one hits me square in the heart, right? Especially for those of us that are uh, have been raised to pay attention to everybody else's needs. We're attending needs, trying to meet needs that nobody's even asking us to meet. And oftentimes our needs are at the bottom of the pile, right? So what's your capacity? What can you let go of? What things are you doing that nobody is asking you to do? Just kind of taking a mental inventory can be helpful there. A master list of care, right? So, what I mean by that is what makes you feel connected, refueled, and loved. and to keep a running list of this, because when we are at our lowest points, when we are most dysregulated, when we are overwhelmed, when we are just at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, our brain is not creative. We're not coming up with like these really great ways to have self-care. We need to look at a list. And so I, on my notes app, on my phone, have a master list of care, and it's just got all sorts of things that I can just open up to if I can't think of anything to as a way to care for myself. And it's got some ideas, big things and little things. So compile that running list of nourishing things. Taking care of yourself is not a treat, right? It's not just something great to do. It's as integral as sleep and food and movement. It is how we keep doing what we're doing in these really hard days. So I would love to hear if you'd like to share what is on your master list of care. What is something big or something little that really nourishes you, that fills you up? Sometimes just hearing from other people can get those creative juices going. What is really supportive and nourishing for you? What we got? Here they come. Yes, gardening, spending time with good friends. Yes, that connection and like saying what's real or just like laughing, right? Having that sense of yeah, that deep connection is so awesome. Walking alone in the sunshine, beautiful. Taking time for a cup of hot tea, absolutely. Yeah, just these simple moments here, everybody. My dog is very understanding. Aren't animals the best of the best? Yeah, for sure. I can't tell you how many people I hear, in the work and the clients that I talk to in coaching, their animals are their lifeblood, right? Are their areas of connection and refueling for sure. Wildflower hunting, Jane, I love that. Anything considered, yeah, that higgy, that comfort and cozying. I love it. I love it. What else do we have here? We got a puppy, which seems crazy because it generates more work. I know, but it brings so much joy for sure. Gail, I feel that deep. Absolutely. One of my colleagues has a new puppy, and oh my goodness, the stories of the destruction. And yet, right? They're so cute. They're so great. Yeah, both things are true. Both things are true. Yeah. So think about that. Think about that master list for yourself. Yeah, a bike ride, a good workout, moving our bodies. Yeah, getting that kind of burning up that cortisol. Absolutely. Those stress hormones can really, really make a difference. No doubt. Okay, know yourself. Pay attention to your triggers. When do you snap? What are the common denominators that are there when you are at the bottom of your barrel, right? When you start to feel lethargic, hopeless. Everybody has their own special and unique blend of overwhelm. So when you can begin to kind of put on your detective hat and notice what are your triggers, right? This is information about when you need a break, when you need to call for reinforcements, when you look at your schedule in the week and you know it is going to be absolutely bonkers, there is no margin for anything to go wrong, think to yourself, how can you set boundaries around your schedule, around your time, in order to create a little bit of margin and learn how to share responsibly, right? It can't all fall on you. And when you're feeling that heaviness, that overwhelm of responsibility, that is something to really look at. Where can you get support? Where can you set up boundaries? How can you seek out those reinforcements? Terry is, as you all know, right? We all love Terry. Hi, Terry. And so grateful just for that bigger perspective that she can offer, right? And so if you're starting to feel like, I don't even know how I could, share this responsibility, reach out to people that, like we were talking about, therapists, coaches, Terry, that are in your corner that can support you and have that bigger bird's eye view of what could be a helpful step forward. And lastly, determine your baseline. Like, what is your bare minimum to function optimally? I'm not talking bare minimum to survive, right? We probably all know, we have all been in those orange and yellow zones, and my goodness, red zones, right? What is your bare minimum to function optimally? How many hours of sleep do you need to just, not be at your lowest point, but to have some of your like most creative optimal juices flowing? What is your bare minimum to movement, to your own needs, to friendships, to connection? Think for yourself before the volcano explodes, or maybe it is exploding. This is your sign, right? What do you need in order to fill yourself up? And how can boundaries help support you to do it? And then lastly, kind of where do you go from here, right? So a little bit of encouragement, because I know these are big, heavy topics, but research suggests that people with healthy boundaries have more capacity for empathy and compassion. Sometimes we think it's the opposite, right? Like, oh, if we have boundaries, people are going to be so mad at us and they're not going to see me as compassionate. But it's the opposite, everybody. When we have boundaries around our relationships, around clarity of what we are going to say yes to, what we are going to say no to, we actually aren't constantly like playing whack-a-mole with the circumstances that are coming up in our life. And therefore, we have more capacity because we're clear on what we are going to say yes and no to. So I always like to kind of think about that. I've picked out a person in my life who I call my boundary superhero. She's kind of my boundaries boss. And she is the most skillful person with boundaries I've ever met. And I sometimes think to myself, what would she do? Like, how would my boundaries boss show up in this difficult care conversation? How would this person say no? How would this person ask for what she needs? And I sometimes just find a little bit of encouragement. So think to yourself, who have you seen set some really good boundaries? Who's a boundaries boss that you can kind of emulate and practice? Maybe you don't know anybody. So maybe think of like a TV character or somebody in the movie, somebody that you can kind of set as an example of setting the boundaries in a way that feels just authentic for you. Schedule a well-being consult on your dashboard for more support. So like I mentioned before, myself as well as my colleague Jackie Carroll, we have free 60-minute sessions that we love to kind of workshop and help folks who are really wanting to set some boundaries. Make an appointment with your therapist, reach out, set up. I'm sure you've heard this before, but we have some fantastic therapists through our Work-Life Connections program. They offer 5 free therapy sessions every fiscal year, which means July 1, you get 5 more that you can spread out or you can use back to back. They are deeply skillful and empathetic and have some really, really great ideas around boundaries. There's a lot of good boundaries books out there. My favorite that I've read in the last few years is by Nedra Tawwab. I also follow her on Instagram. She is great. She has got a couple books out there, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. She has a new one out that just came out at the beginning of this year. I haven't read it yet, but it's all about boundaries and family. Last Frontier. So I definitely going to be checking out that one as well. But check out her work. It is very research-based. It is clear, and I find it really accessible. Her examples, she's got a boundaries workbook out there that's also excellent. I had a client who was going to start a boundaries book club, reading books all about boundaries. Great idea, right? And the last thing I will just say is that the guilt doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, right? So pay attention to that. as you set boundaries, as people have reactions to the boundaries that you've set, really invite you to remember what type of guilt is it. And if it's the type of guilt that is in response to being uncomfortable with other people's discomfort and displeasure, that is definitely something to play with and to work through. So, wanted to open it up for any questions, any thoughts. What have you found that has been helpful with setting boundaries? Would love to hear.